Welcome back to Sunday Vibes, one and all, to a beautifully sunny London. I'm going to the pub after this one for a couple of drinks. Joining me on the show today, we've got Christopher Hamill, we've got Patrick Van Straten. Hamster, how are you?
Absolutely buzzing. I've not spoken about the ESL for at least 4.5 hours. So ecstatic, and looking forward to the EFL Cup final, not ESL, where Ryan Mason will potentially become the second most successful Tottenham manager in the last 20 years. Come on, up the mace from Football Social to the EFL Cup final in 8 months.
29-year-old Ryan Mason, by the way. Pato, how are you?
My prediction for the EFL Cup final is that I will not watch it. I've got 8 days until my wife's due date. I mean, obviously,
oh my God.
Babies tend to be about a week late on average, a week to 10 days late. So I may be here a bit longer, but I can't wait to fuck off for 3 months and not have to think about football.
Unbelievable, yeah. Let's get the comments going right now. Congratulating Pato, because it's not long to go now. But yeah, we're not going to be talking too much about the ESL today. We're not going to let the fight against these clowns die, but equally we've just spoken about the ESL to death really over the last 7 days. So we do want to touch kind of upon Jose Mourinho, because that story has flown quite heavily under the radar, just as Daniel Levy would have wanted it to over the past 7 days. I'm pretty sure that announcement on Monday was perfectly timed from his position. But it's not just Jose Mourinho we're going to touch upon, is it, Hamster? We're going to be kind of ranking managers who've been fired.
Yeah, before we get into the rules though, I don't think Pat has named his baby-to-be yet, so get your suggestions in the comments, because rumour has it he is very open to throwing it to a Football Daily community poll. Isn't that right, Pat?
I love it. I love it. I think that'd be very you, Pat, wouldn't it? To use a Football Daily Twitter poll to pick your baby's name.
If there's one thing I love, it's football being involved in my personal life. So yeah, I would love it. Actually, I've had lots of very nice messages though from Football Daily fans. Yeah, like the fans aren't the problem. It's you assholes who are the issue.
Yeah,
all right, I respect it. Go on then, Hamster. What are the rules?
So what's happened here is we've handpicked 10 managers that were sacked this season. They've got to still be out of a job, by the by, so that excludes the likes of Thomas Tuchel. He would definitely be a cheaped response to this question. And then we have to rank them from 1 to 10. And we also have to agree on a good destination for said manager. So, for example, we could go Jose Mourinho, number 1, best of the bunch, and agree that he should probably go to Celtic. He is actually in the book his top 3 favourites to go to Celtic. It is a terrifying prospect at this point. But yeah, there you go, Joseph. Just to lay down the rules.
Okay, so should we leave the ranking to the end? Because we obviously won't have revealed all 10 names. Should we go through the sackings first?
Yeah, that makes sense, doesn't it?
Cool.
Okay, so let's start by talking about Jose Mourinho, because I feel like he's going to take up the majority of this chat. Pato, obviously ignore the rumours about him leaving because of the ESL, or like he quit because he was opposed to it. What a load of rubbish.
He's a martyr.
Fired for footballing reasons. And Pato, are you in agreement with the firing and with the timing, is the 2 questions?
The timing, I think, is a bit weird. Like, regardless of how bad he's been, he has got them to the final of this cup. And it's not like sacking him this week was really going to save them anything, as far as I'm aware. So it didn't really make sense to me. It's not like they can really salvage their season. I don't think anybody reasonable thinks that Spurs are going to end up finishing in the top 4. They're obviously out of the Europa League, so their season's basically done. Like, all they've got is this final. Like, so I do kind of think maybe he should have been given the opportunity to manage in that final. But I also don't care at all that he hasn't been given the opportunity, because I think he's been living on a prayer there for a long time. Like, this is something that, to be honest, I mean, he should never really have been hired. And gradually he's just alienated different members of the squad. He's just worked his way around. He hangs the players out to dry again and again. He doesn't have a particular style. I think pretty much every problem at that club has been down to him this season. Like I really do. Like I think the squad is excellent. Like I can't remember which game I was watching the other day, but some pundit was saying like, oh, Spurs, their squad isn't that good. I think Spurs have got an amazing squad. And especially their first 11. If you look at the 11 that Ryan Mason played in his first game as Bosz, except for Kane missing, I thought it was an absolutely fantastic first 11. Like, it's really, really good side. And Mourinho has shown an inability to get his best players on the pitch again and again. Like, when they've given up points this season, it's been because they've played too conservatively after taking leads. And they've been lucky to take leads because Son is on the best finishing streak of his career. Kane has been in absolutely staggering form. Like, I don't know. I just feel like, what has Mourinho actually added to that club except discord and an enormous financial hole that needs to be filled? I don't really know why they hired him. I think this was a bad move all round. My opinion of him hasn't really gone down in the time that he's been there. It's exactly as low as it was before, maybe. Well, maybe not actually, because the way that he continues to hang the players out to dry for his own failings, I really object to that in managers. I really, really don't like it. Especially somebody as experienced as Mourinho. Mourinho could use the fact that he has got this reputation as being like a winner. He's got a winning mentality, which of course is, the stupidest phrase in football. Like, he's got that reputation, and he could have used that to protect his players. He could have said, you know what, like, give me that criticism. Like, I've won everything there is to win in the game. I can take it. But instead, again and again, he's just like, well, I'm doing everything right. It's the players who are at fault. I think that's ludicrous, and I think he deserved to lose his job, and I really hope we don't see him in the Premier League again.
Yeah, it's an interesting one because obviously the timing's been much talked about, hasn't it? And I do wonder, I've obviously seen the rumours online, I do wonder whether there were additional bonuses potentially in Jose's contract around winning cups and trophies,
yeah,
and potentially add-ons if that was to be achieved, and add-ons if he was to make the top four. So maybe Daniel's chosen to let him go now. Obviously, I don't know. This is pure speculation because he wouldn't have had to pay him the extra few million if he won that trophy, and the fact that he's out of the top four at the moment might make it easier in terms of sacking him in the finance department. But I think we can all agree, like, this has been coming. This has absolutely been coming. And Manchester United, Tottenham, was it last weekend or the weekend before? United was so far clear of that Tottenham side in that second half that I was quite shocked, because you think back to the start of the season when obviously Tottenham absolutely mullered United. The two different trajectories of those sides is frightening, given this is supposed to be Jose Mourinho's second season syndrome at his best, team flying, everyone pulling in the right direction before the wheels fall off. And now players like Dele Alli, I'm sure, rubbing their hands together, thinking I can come back into the fold now. It's a bit of a shame for him. Probably hasn't come sooner because he won't make the plane for England at the Euros. But yeah, absolutely right to sack him, and it's been a long time coming. Hamster, what are your thoughts on it?
Yeah, I can only really supplement what you two guys have said, covered it pretty extensively there. It's definitely not all down to results, and I did dig out a pretty what the fuck stat wherein only Manchester City, Liverpool and Manchester United have accrued more Premier League points than Jose Mourinho's Tottenham side in his 17 months there. It's been down to performances, like you've touched upon. It's been down to morale. And when I've really liked Tottenham this season, obviously we go back to the explosive performance against Manchester United. Yes, you had a man sent off, but they were pretty dominant beforehand, weren't they? They followed that up with a really good victory against Arsenal. It's mainly been down to some scintillating individual performances. And when they've not been able to sustain that, the rest of the team, or whatever the rest of the team has been instructed to do, can't make up for that, right? And you take a look at their underlying numbers and it is all very average. So we can park our opinion, put our opinion aside. Subjectively, they take the 13th most amount of shots in the league on 11.1. That's lower than Fulham, Wolves, Brighton, and they are the 8th for most shots conceded on 12.6. Again, lower than the three aforementioned sides. And this is despite Harry Kane bumping his numbers up from recent times. I think he's near 4 shots per 90. So even though that he's had two of the most deadly marksmen in the league, they're still struggling. And that isn't the sign of a side, or the hallmark of a side, who are on the cusp of like re-breaking back into the top 4. If he was getting the same amount out of the players as, say, Brendan Rodgers is at Leicester, and the results weren't going his way, okay, because of missing personnel, extenuating circumstances like COVID, the fans, all that bullshit. But it's not. But he's not. I know they've lost, 20 points from winning positions, and if they'd, just won half of them, they would be in the top 4. But that's because, the game management of the side has been bad. And game management and the subs and how a team, shapes up in the last 10, 15 minutes is disproportionately down to the manager than the preceding, 60, 70 minutes, isn't it? So, yeah, Jose for me, not a great stint at Tottenham. I think, like Pat, is probably not dented many people's expectations or perceptions of him. Like, I think he was very unlikely to get a top job prior to that anyway. But would still rank relatively highly on this list for me.
Come on then, you said at the start about almost like jokingly that he's the third choice to take over Celtic. What level do we honestly think Jose is now capable of managing at? Because, like, are we saying Celtic levels? Surely there's slightly larger, not larger because obviously Celtic are huge, but like bigger jobs in Europe that will be chasing Jose Mourinho.
Yeah, but why would you give him the job? Like, I mean, like, because you have to factor in here how much money it costs to get Jose Mourinho to manage your club.
Yeah.
Like, I don't think he's like worthless or whatever, but then I also think, I look at this Spurs squad and I see the talent in it and how little Mourinho got out of it. And I think, well, do I trust him with a team that's less talented relative to their division? And if I have a team that's more talented relative to their division, do I go and get Mourinho? Are there not better options available? And as for a team like Celtic, like, you can make an argument based on Mourinho's past. You can say, okay, when Mourinho was at Real Madrid and he did have superior talent, they were really fun attacking side, actually. And he's previously had a good record in knockout competitions. So that kind of works quite well for doing well domestically and maybe overachieving in Europe. Like, you could see that argument for Celtic. But the time when he did those things is getting further and further away. And when you factor in how much money Celtic would have to raise to pay him his wages, I think Celtic can. I'm not going to say necessarily do better, though. I think I am going to say that Celtic can do better and they can be smarter. Yeah, that is how I feel.
He's not a good fit right now. He's not a good fit right now. Like, he might have been great for this season. A season where we had to win at all costs, where if we upset various players, it didn't matter so much because they're entering the final years of their contracts and they're going to depart for decent fees anyway. But now, Celtic need like 6 to 8 players this summer. The turnover is going to be huge. And yeah, like we've already established, he's complained about having very good talent. Maybe not elite talent all over the pitch, but he's complained about having very good talent. Like when he said, same coach, different players. When he was asked why Spurs keep dropping points at the end of games, because prior to that, his defensive record was very good with X, Y, and Z. Like, if he's throwing those sort of players under the bus, he would kill Ryan Christie after his 8th shot of the game from 35 yards with his left foot, cutting in like the Scottish Iron Robin. So now, no, I think we need a manager who is geared up for a rebuild and doesn't expect instant success, because Celtic have put themselves in a very difficult position to achieve success even next year at this point.
Yeah, I kind of agree. I wonder whether national team management is calling Jose now. Whether it's maybe still a little bit early, but it kind of feels like that narrative slowly starting to build, doesn't it? Potentially after Euro 2020, I'd imagine quite a few national team jobs will become available. And I think his name will probably be in the ring for quite a few of those. They can tend to be quite well paid. And I just think that might suit him a little bit more. At the moment, given the sort of knockout, doesn't have to be quite so tactically astute, potentially at international level. It might suit his game management. So I think, I don't know about the Portugal job, but maybe something like that. All right, let's go to the next one then, Hamill. And this is another man linked with Celtic, Chris Wilder, who of course was sacked by Sheffield United after back-to-back promotions, bringing them to the Premier League, finishing 10th, and then obviously a bit of a shambles of a season and quite a shambolic window. But he's another bloke linked to the hoops, isn't he?
This is my master plan. I've actually queued up a 40-minute chat about who Celtic should hire as their next manager. Yeah, listen, I think Chris Wilder probably, well, at least according to Prince Abdullah, he wanted to leave, didn't he? Maybe before his reputation took a further beating with Sheffield United, what rooted to the bottom of the Premier League for most of the season. They've still only got 2 wins to the name, haven't they? But yeah, a tremendous job with that club, but was also backed to an okay extent. Spent 119 mil, didn't he, in his 2 seasons in the Premier League, and they felt a little bit haphazard. And I don't want to criticise him too much for that, because it must be very, very hard to get players to Sheffield United in the first place, right? Not the most glamorous club, not the most glamorous playing style, and did have some hits with Sander Berg, and then, you know, Sander Berg gets injured. Ryan Brewster's not scoring any goals. Like, it did feel a little bit piecemeal, didn't it? And I don't know if he was reluctant to work with the director of football, but maybe he would have benefited from someone helping him out in that regard. Yeah, I think maybe another like aspirational championship side beckons. I don't know about you boys, but I don't know if he's done enough to walk into another Premier League job straight away.
I think there'll be a few Premier League sides interested in him. Don't get me wrong. I'm seeing rumours of Crystal Palace being linked to the likes of Patrick Vieira. Of course, Roy Hodgson out of contract in the summer. And they're being heavily linked to managers of that calibre. And I would take Chris Wilder over Patrick Vieira. So if that's the sort of level Palace are aspiring to, then Chris Wilder definitely stands a shot of getting back into Premier League management pretty soon.
That might be the first time anyone said that sentence, by the way. I'll take Chris Wilder over Patrick Vieira.
I would, obviously,
yeah, I
agree. Not on the field, but yeah, I think at bare minimum a top level championship side, because even though he did spend fairly poorly, this squad down in the championship, I think, is pretty well set up for it. I definitely think Brewster and McBurney down in the championship will be a really, really solid front line for them if they can keep hold of, and I'm pretty sure they will be able to keep hold of both of them. They'll still have the likes of O'Connell back there. I think Basham's still back there. Ramsdale, okay, not been brilliant in the Premier League and probably not quite at that calibre potentially, but an absolutely fine championship goalkeeper. So that squad, although it didn't get improved quite how it should have done under Wilder, will still be fine in the championship. But yeah, I agree. Pat,
he must back himself though, Pat. He must back himself to get a Premier League job if he effectively forced his way out the door.
Well, he might have also thought it was best for the club. I mean, like that certainly seems to be, part of his thinking. But I don't see why he shouldn't back himself to get a Premier League job. I rate Chris Wilder, in a way, I can say a similar thing to what I said about Mourinho. Like, my opinion of Chris Wilder has not really been changed at all by this season. I still think he's a fantastic manager who's going to overachieve with talent. If I were a club like Palace, he'd be really, really high on my list. Really high. Like, I certainly agree that he'd be above Patrick Vieira. He'd certainly be above guys like Eddie Howe. To me, anyone who's considering Eddie Howe should cross him off their list and replace him with Chris Wilder. Because it's staggering to me that we live in a world where Eddie Howe is talked about for a job like the Spurs job, or Steve Bruce continues to get managerial jobs in the Premier League, but someone like Chris Wilder, we're saying, well, maybe he'll have to settle for a job at the top of the Championship.
Eddie Howe did a very similar job with Bournemouth that Chris Wilder's done with Crystal Palace. Like, overachieved in the lower echelons, very good at recruiting at that level, and finished in the top half of the table in the Premier League before ultimately succumbing to relegation.
But they were never good. Like, I mean, even when they
came ninth once,
but even when they managed to stay up, like, they weren't actually good. Like, they got lucky a few times. They were the worst offensive side in the league pretty much every season that Howe was there. There were a couple of seasons where Callum Wilson had a good campaign. There was that one season where Ryan Fraser was good. Remember that? But they were never actually a particularly solid side. Whereas when you look at Sheffield United last season, you look at their stats last season, they were a good side. Like, they were a good mid-table team with absolutely no talent. I think they had worse talent last season than Howe had in most seasons that he was at Bournemouth. And also, I just think that Chris Wilder, you can imagine that Chris Wilder has more to offer because he's clearly an innovative, thoughtful coach. Whereas with Eddie Howe, it was never like you were watching Bournemouth and they were doing like clever, interesting stuff. They were just like playing football quite badly. Like, I mean, with Chris Wilder, I think it would be quite interesting to see what he'd do with different kinds of players. You can make that argument with him in a way that people used to make it with Sam Allardyce, people used to make it with Eddie Howe, and I don't think there was any real reason to think that. So I definitely think that he'd be an interesting guy to take at a club. What I would say is that, similar to Howe, if I was going to hire Chris Wilder, I'd want to hire him and say, you get the players that we give you. Like, your recruitment record does not fill us with joy. So we're going to give you players and you can coach them. I think that's, to be honest, I think you should say that to most managers, especially English managers. But I think he needs the right setup. And so, for instance, if like Graham Potter left Brighton, I think Chris Wilder would be a really good hire to replace him.
Yeah, I mean, that's an interesting shout, because I think Graham Potter probably will have quite high level clubs interested in him. I don't know whether about this summer, but like, I think Tottenham could do an awful lot worse than look at a Graham Potter.
He's on their list, supposedly.
Some of the names I'm seeing being linked with that Tottenham job, I think, would they be any better than Graham Potter? Let's go to another sack manager then, Frankie Lamps. It feels like Lampard is going to struggle to get a new job. I don't know why, but from my perspective, like, the clubs that he would be willing to join, I don't think match up with what they want. I don't think Frank Lampard is going to be able to go out there and get like a top half Premier League club. Certainly not to the level he's expecting. I saw him linked with the England under-21 job as well. I think that would be a bit of a weird move. I think that would be a bit of a step backwards in his career. I think they'll probably give it to Cochrane as well, already involved in the England setup. I honestly don't have a clue where Frank Lampard can go from here.
Yeah, it's difficult.
It feels like he's peaked.
It's difficult because I don't really know still what sort of manager he is. Like, we speak about, to bring Eddie Howe and Chris Wilder back into the conversation, like, I would absolutely back Chris Wilder to take over at Crystal Palace because of the existing personnel there, right? And like his system compared to a Roy Hodgson system, not massively dissimilar, but much more progressive, I guess. And you can see the room for potential. Like Eddie Howe, I could see why a club that played attractive football would want to employ Eddie Howe, because he always put together a very proficient attack. He might have relied on some individuals overperforming at times, but like defence was always his problem, wasn't it? With Frank Lampard, I just like he needed another couple seasons at Derby, maybe even to figure out what sort of manager he was before he just became this kind of reactive guy at Chelsea. I mean, he put together a competent Chelsea side, but I think his stint was still a little bit overplayed. Like the worst points per game total of any permanent Chelsea manager in the Premier League. Like a very bang average win percentage given the talent he had at his disposal. His legacy is still going to be bringing that talent through, right? But ultimately, yeah, just a guy who was lucky to be in the job, and it's probably stopped him figuring a few crucial things out about how he's going to develop as a manager. I think he'd take over a Championship side and do a competent job for anyone really, but Premier League again feels generous.
Yeah, I just looking at the Premier League table now, I just don't see that many managers parting from their clubs this summer either. I really don't even see the likes of Steve Bruce leaving Newcastle if he successfully keeps them up. I think Crystal Palace, potentially, obviously that contractual situation with Roy Hodgson, but everybody else I think is probably still going to be in a job next season. Pat, where do you see Frank Lampard as his next job?
I do feel like I know kind of what kind of manager Frank Lampard is. Like, he is a high pressing manager. He's a press and possess coach. Like, so stylistically, you have some idea of the kind of football he's going to play. My issue with Frank, I think, is going to be his ego. Like, whether he can set aside like his ego is going to be the issue. So, because I think that there's a lesson in Thierry Henry's managerial trajectory for Lampard. You know, Thierry Henry obviously went to Monaco, like flamed out spectacularly, had a bit of an ego check, and then went to MLS and kind of rehabilitated his reputation. And I think that Frank Lampard, he's still an extremely young guy. By all accounts, he's not stupid. Like, this would be a good opportunity for him to take a step back, maybe go and do some of the stuff we've heard other managers do, you know, where they go and like spend some time coaching under guys like Nagelsmann or whoever it might be and learn different ways of looking at the game. I think that this would be a really good opportunity for Frank Lampard to do that, or to go somewhere like MLS and just focus on expanding his tactical understanding of the game so that he's really prepared when a big job does come up again. My issue with Frank, though, is that I'm just not sure if he's open to doing that. Like, I think that the whole time he was in charge of Chelsea, he demonstrated a really staggering level of arrogance and privilege. The whole conversation with Raheem Sterling about white privilege, that was embarrassing. The fact that he never took responsibility for his side's bad results, he just blamed players, I thought that was embarrassing. Those are going to be issues, and I think they're symptomatic of a larger problem, which is probably that he believes he belongs at the top level as a coach. If he's willing to set that aside and just focus on developing as a manager, he can probably still be a really good manager. It's just whether he's going to do that. So I hope that he is willing to take a job at a lower level. Even if he could learn another language and go to another country, though, again, knowing the English doesn't seem likely.
Maybe he can use his contacts, Pat, at CFG, City Football Group, in a similar way to, Patrick Vieira, to manage one of their many satellite clubs, be part of that whole setup, learn an ethos that is obviously spearheaded and trickles down by Pep Guardiola, and then have another run at a big job. Because, we obviously we didn't speak down about Vieira. I know, Joe, you just said you'd prefer Wilder to Vieira, but, there's a guy who has kind of done
that's not huge disrespect either.
No,
Wilder's good.
It's not. And there's a guy who's done the reverse of Thierry Henry and the reverse of Frank Lampard. He's tried to go about it in the right way, hasn't he? And he worked his way up to Nice and kind of did a competent job at first, I guess. And now he's got to sort of lick his wounds a little bit. But I'm sure he'll get a similar level job to that. But yeah, I think he should probably do something like that. But yeah, it'd be interesting to see where you boys put him when it comes to this list at the very end, actually.
Yeah, all right. Let's fly through some of the other ones then, because we're getting stuck on some of the big Premier League names. Very quickly, let's touch on Slaven Bilic. His sort of level feels quite low now.
Not
to
good.
Me.
Not a good manager.
I feel like his reputation is extremely low. I think Championship is probably the best he could hope for. A middling Championship side, because I even think some of the more progressive sides in the Championship would probably look at Slaven Bilic and think, not for us anymore. I don't know whether you two have got anything to add to that, but I don't see him as a Premier League manager.
Same.
No, I could see him maybe overperforming with I don't know, if he gets the right Championship club, someone that went close maybe this year and who has got a pretty settled attack, because that is the sort of football he likes to play, isn't it? Possession-based, attacking football. But yeah, he can't just turn a club round or dramatically improve personnel at an underperforming Championship club, in my opinion. And I don't like to write any manager off. Look what David Moyes did this campaign. But he needs specific personnel. And do you really get that trying to pick a job in the Championship? Not sure.
All right, then. Let's move abroad. Eusebio Di Francesco. Who wants to take him?
The Italian Eddie Howe.
I remember you being a fan of him, Pat.
Remember
you being a fan of him when he was at Roma?
No, I was a fan of him when he was at Sassuolo. Yeah,
right, okay.
He really overperformed at Sassuolo, but he's never really been able to coach a defence. And that's happened again this season. I mean, he's at Cagliari, but they actually have pretty good talent. Marco Rourke, who's a really good player, and they had some old stages in. I mean, I think that maybe it's a little bit misleading because you think that they're good and they're not really anymore, but he had Nainggolan, and I think he had Diego Godin as well. So there was some talent there, but he was very like Eddie Howe. The reason he got a good reputation in Italy was because he was playing quite fun, exciting, attacking football with an interesting Sassuolo side when they had De Frel and they had Berardi when he was still really young. They were a pretty exciting outfit. But Di Francesco, I think that maybe Serie A is too much for him now. He's not particularly old guy, but he's failed too many times now in that division. I think that he might have to give up or maybe go to Serie B.
Oof.
There's a lot of journeymen in Serie A, isn't there? The lower half of Serie A. That is part of their kind of. I feel like part of their culture is giving guys the job that don't necessarily deserve it, and they're not bothered about hiring and firing 3 or 4 in a season. But I thought he was kind of a spent force after Sampdoria, to be honest. I think they conceded 17 in 8 games, and he won, 2 of 8, and then Samp just sacked him off quick time. And that was pretty damning. But yeah, maybe we should just send a bunch of these guys to the MLS.
Yeah, I think the next name on the list is probably slightly more interesting, Peter Bosz, because I think he's one of the more recent fireys, isn't he? But yeah, I feel like his reputation, maybe in England more so, is in my head is still slightly higher than a Di Francesco. Obviously, Leverkusen were pretty solid up until Christmas, and then it kind of all unravelled pretty quick, and it's not the first time something like that has happened in Peter Bosz's career. 4 victories in 17 games is pretty rotten, but he's been close to trophies, man. He's been close to trophies with sides. Obviously, I think he was the manager for Ajax, wasn't he, against Manchester United in the 16-17 that Europa League final, and they weren't good enough on the day. It was a very young team, though, and I think he got to a Pokal final as well, didn't he, with Leverkusen. So I think his reputation, I don't know about you two, is still okay. I think he could probably still get a fairly decent job.
Yeah, I think he repaired his reputation somewhat at Bayer Leverkusen after that sort of disastrous spell at Borussia Dortmund that only lasted, I think it was between 25 and 30 games before they chopped him ultimately. And yeah, 109 games at Leverkusen looks pretty good in comparison. Win rate of 54%. That would have dropped off quite substantially, like you said, owing to a really poor recent run. But they looked good for a Champions League spot before the winter break. But it's just been disastrous after. I think, yeah, they lost 2-1 to Bayern Munich before the winter break. And then after that, I think, like you've already pointed out, Joe, knocked out the Europa League, knocked out the German Cup, 4 victories, 10 losses. It's just all come undone. And I feel like his full throttle style of football can sometimes give way to this. It's what kind of people have falsely accused Marcelo Bielsa of being guilty of in the past. But yeah, again, an attack-minded side with maybe some robust defensive talent might not be the worst shout. Like if Graham Potter moves on, would he be fun at Brighton? Maybe.
All right, Pat, anything to add before we move on to Lucien Favre?
I actually think Peter Bosz would be a really interesting signing for Celtic. Really interesting.
Oi.
Interesting.
Hamill, what was that? What was your immediate first thought there?
Yeah, when I was scripting this earlier today, I thought it wouldn't be the worst appointment. I think it'd be really fun. I'm not sure. Again, I'm not sure that if he'd be given the budget to bring in players or shopping in markets that he's used to or has become accustomed to. I couldn't say with any great confidence like he is the guy to rebuild the current team. But it'd be fun in attack none the least. We actually need a good attacking coach next season because Eduard's quite clearly off, isn't he? Yeah,
well, as well, like the Celtic business model, right? Of like, okay, we need to sell to bigger leagues. Like having a manager who can get really good production out of attackers, I think is like a great way to do that. If you've got a coach there who gets good numbers out of attackers, which Bosz has done pretty much everywhere, and especially with young players throughout his career, then you can imagine that adds, 2 mil here, 5 mil there, and that money really adds up in the Scottish League.
Yeah.
Yeah, I wouldn't be disappointed with it. Would not be disappointed.
Let's move on to the next one then. Let's hurry through some of these because we're at 35 minutes already. Lucien Favre, obviously sacked by Borussia Dortmund, or I think replaced by Marco Rose effectively. They knew that he was coming around, wanted to snag him quickly, partner him alongside Erling Haaland again, because those two have worked together in the past, haven't they? So it might have been one of the reasons behind it, trying to convince Haaland to stay on another season. But of course, Marco Rose is fantastic, and Lucien Favre is now out of another job. Bit of a journeyman now, Lucien Favre. He's just bang average. Whenever I think of Favre, I just think, you're okay. Like, you do an okay job everywhere you are.
He's recorded the highest point average of any Borussia Dortmund coach in history on 2.9 a game in his 30 months at Dortmund. So he did do a very, very good job. I just think, like, in some ways, maybe he became a victim of his own success at Dortmund in that, like, they looked like they might catch Bayern. They didn't, and then they got further away from doing that. And maybe the hierarchy thought this was showing signs of some sort of terminal decline. But then obviously, you remember Marco Rose and how highly rated he is, and it makes that move seem much more tactical or kind of well thought through than this being purely about performances. So I think he did a fine job at Dortmund, and he shouldn't struggle to get a job elsewhere, but might, just because he's not much of a personality in the media, is he? He's not. I don't think he will spring to mind for anyone.
No, I know what you mean. I do know what you mean. Although that Borussia Dortmund squad is so split, isn't it? It does have some unbelievable youngsters, but it also has some very average aging players, I feel like. I don't know what you think, Pat, but Lucien Favre's next sort of level, what do you think it is?
Quite middling. I'm not the biggest fan of him, but I agree with Chris. I think he did a fantastic job at Dortmund, and I think it's ironic that for years, the knock against Favre that his teams kind of got lucky, that they often performed at a better level than their underlying numbers suggested. But then when he actually left, the team was doing worse than their underlying numbers suggested. And I think if they'd kept him, they might have been in the title race this season. So I feel a bit sorry for him. I actually think that when we come to rank these, I will put Favre quite highly. Or quite high, rather.
All right. Yeah, fair. Very dodgy at the pack, though, still. But yeah, let's move on to Julien Stephen at Rennes. Do you think he was just a victim of his own success last year, taking Rennes to third, Hamster?
Maybe. I did a video on my channel 6 to 8 months ago, and I was like, if Julien Stephen ever becomes available and the sort of managerial landscape is the same as it is now, I would snap him up at Celtic. A tremendous history of developing youth as well. You think of all the talent that's come out of Rennes in the last 4 or 5 years, he's kind of been at the epicenter of developing that talent. Not least Ousmane Dembele, Rafinha. Yeah, they finished third last season. That was their best ever position. I know that it was a truncated season because of COVID and whatnot, but they qualified for the Champions League for the first time in their history. And yeah, it did come undone this term. I think played 26, only won 10 at the time of his sacking, 18 points behind Lyon, who were in third place, which had become, weirdly the benchmark for them, when mid-table for Rennes, who were constantly selling talent, kind of feels fine. You sell a couple crucial players at Rennes, you're gonna feel it, right? And that's not necessarily the manager's fault that he's put these players in the shop window for your club to get handsome fees for. I would have given him a bit more time, but then again, I've not been watching Rennes week in, week out. There might be something more obvious at play.
All right, Patrick Vieira, fired by Nice back in, I think it was around December time, wasn't it? He's now being quite heavily linked to the Crystal Palace job. I've seen a lot of British media outlets linking Patrick Vieira to that role. Do you think that's the right sort of level?
I don't really know, man. Not really. He hasn't done particularly well.
Me neither.
Hasn't done particularly well in Ligue 1. I don't know why you'd really hire him. I think there's some of this idea, isn't there, when a player, because Vieira played for such an exciting, amazing Arsenal side, people assume he's going to play exciting, amazing football as a coach, and that's never really been the case. Nice have been pretty dull under him, and yeah, I don't know. The thing with Vieira is, again, he's pretty young. He's got the opportunity to improve, but at this point, he's been in management for quite a while, and he's yet to do anything that impresses me. So, I personally don't think that I would really take much of a gamble on him, especially as I actually think Nice have some pretty good talent. Amin Gouiri has had a fantastic season. There are guys who are not superstars, but guys like Kasper Dolberg, who are quite interesting, at least, especially for Nice. He hasn't really shone with those guys, so I don't know. I think jury's out of Vieira. I think Championship is kind of Vieira's level, maybe.
Yeah, it's going to be an interesting one, but I definitely agree. I think there are better options for Palace in the market than Patrick Vieira. Last one then, Andre Villas-Boas, Hamster. Another manager who did pretty well in that 1920 campaign that got sliced in half over in the French league, because he finished second.
Yeah, I did just forget about who Rennes bought in the last section, actually. Jeremy Doku and Guirassy haven't really worked out, have they? But Andres Villas-Boas didn't even have the luxury of spending money like Stefan at Rennes. Their transfer business over the last few seasons has been bizarre. He was obviously fuming. They sold Morgan Sanson to Aston Villa and then brought in Oliver Ncham from Celtic. Olivier Ncham, sorry, Oliver, anglicised his name, to replace him. And it was that was really the catalyst for the whole situation that then unfurled over the next week. We had ultras at the ground. He was slagging off the sporting director, wasn't it? I think Pablo Longoria. And he was just saying, I can't be part of this sporting project where the manager's not really consulted who goes out and who comes in, which to me is kind of like fair enough. And then, I think Ncham has not really made an impression since, and he's kind of been proved, I don't know, maybe correct with how they're going about building their squad. But again, I think like we don't have massive eyes on this, but is it Frank McCourt who owns the team? Like there's been a lot of stuff going on behind the scenes there, hasn't there, with regards to like, does he still want to run the club, etc, etc. So I think there's probably bigger things at play in Marseille. But yeah, he is a good manager. Like he'd rehabilitated his career at Zenit after a pretty average spell at Tottenham and a poor spell at Chelsea. And I think he's probably going to be in my top like 4, maybe.
Yeah, let's get on to the rankings then. Should we just crack on with the rankings? Because there is 10 names. Do we want to do all 10? Do we want to give a top 5, top 3? What do you boys want to do?
It is interesting. Should we give our top 3 then out of all the names that have been mentioned?
I think top 3's slightly
Good
better. Because I think I'll forget someone and then I'll be panicking off the back of that. Let's start with our number 3 then. Pat, who are you putting in your 3rd position?
Probably Wilder.
Ooh.
Probably Wilder. I mean, my top 3 are quite interchangeable. But Wilder's a guy. I think it's because the other 2, I'd be happy giving any of these guys a mid-level team or a bad team. But the other 2, I think I'd be a little bit more excited to give them a really good team.
Go on, why don't you just crack your 3 out?
Okay, well, I'm going to put Wilder 3rd. Then I'm going to go a big punch with Julien St&eacute in 2nd. And then I think top has to be Lucien Favre of these choices. Like, okay. Lucien Favre is the only one that, like, I think it would be not an embarrassing choice for a big side. Like, is he going to make you great? No. But is he going to show you up? Also no. Like, he'd be if Spurs hired Lucien Favre, I wouldn't be like scared of Spurs, but I'd also know that they weren't going to like crash and burn spectacularly. Some of these other managers, I don't have that confidence about. And Julien St&eacute, I just think, has earned a little bit of credit for for overperforming with a pretty mediocre side. I think that there's a lot of promise there. Like, he might turn out to be nothing special, but he might turn out to be really good.
All right, then. It's interesting how we're ranking them, because I feel like I want to put Jose in my top 3 if it's a national team job. I'm not too sure whether I'd have him in there at club level. Obviously, he is a superior manager to some of the names on the list, but the package and baggage and money that comes with him knock him down quite substantially, I think, in my thinking. I'll definitely agree. I think I'll have Chris Wilder at 2, though. I think Chris Wilder for pretty much any Premier League side, sort of 10th and down, would be a very good appointment right now. I'll have Lucien Favre at 1 as well. Solid pair of hands. And then I think I'm tempted to go for Peter Bosz at 3.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
I think that's fair.
I'm going to go Peter Bosz at 3. So I'll go Lucien Favre at 1, big Chris Wilder 2, Peter Bosz at 3, and then Jose would probably be in and around there if it wasn't for the baggage that came with him. What about you, Chris?
Instinctively, I was thinking Wilder, Favre, Bosz. But that is because I feel like Jose needs some time away from football. Like, Jose is obviously got the best resume. He's going to leave the best legacy out of all of these guys. But if we're thinking like who is going to take over at your club tomorrow, you know what? Yeah, let me stick with those 3.
Okay.
Favre, Bosz.
Sticking with those 3. Let's do one quick fire question then, and it is ESL related. It's from Prison Mike, I think, and it says, should the Premier League clubs who join the ESL be punished? Pato, let's get your thoughts on this one.
If you can, but you can't really. Like, I just don't think you can. I mean, the annoying thing is that they're not only are they not going to be punished, they're going to be rewarded. because everybody was talking this week like this was an enormous victory, and in some ways it was. Like, it was really good that it showed, people could band together and stop something like this happening. On the other hand, as anybody who's paying attention will tell you, like, the UEFA Champions League reforms basically give the big clubs half of what they wanted anyway, more than. So unless that gets radically revamped, and there's a possibility it will, because there's a campaign about that as well. But I beg leave to doubt it. I think that they're just going to end up better off than they were before. And by the sounds of things, UEFA kind of bribes them as well. Like, I mean, there are pretty strong reports coming out of Spain that UEFA have offered big grants to the English clubs to get them to drop out of the European Super League, knowing the Super League couldn't stand without them. So I would like to see them punished in some way. I'm not sure what that punishment should be. But on the other hand, I don't know. Like, I mean, this is what businesses do. They try and seek ways to become financially better off than their rivals. Like, this is not... Everyone's acting like this is some new weird thing. And to be honest, I found a lot of the talk from pundits, the kind of Manchester United football club, where they have to say football club after every club's name. I found that all quite embarrassing and quite silly, because this is all just of a piece with the way that football is. Like, football's like this all the time, and the fact that people only notice when it's the Super League, I find a little bit strange. So yeah, take their money if you can, but you can't.
Yeah, just to bring it back to that question, should the Premier League clubs be punished? Definitely. I think they definitely should, but it's extremely hard to punish them. People will talk about points deductions. I would love to see that happen, but I think the Premier League are probably panicking about, if they deduct points, does it devalue their overall product? By not having these big six in the league, if they were to knock them down and relegate them, something like that, which I would be absolutely fine with. I can't see them doing it, but I definitely think they need to be punished. They need to be stripped of their executive roles within the Premier League. They need to be stood down from the boards of a number of other roles in and around the Premier League that they're on. And I think the real punishment should be coming in the form of a change of ownership structure that I'm hoping governmental reform will enforce. But yeah, I think they should be punished, and punished heavily. What do you think, Amsterdam?
Matt, I think I'd just be repeating what you've said. I think you put it very well there.
All right, then let's do our personal question then. Finally, from Joey, he says, best and worst airline you've flown on. There's only one answer for me for worst, Hamill. Do you remember the plane we flew on in Russia?
No, because I've blocked that out of my fucking memory.
It was a plane from Moscow to Sochi, and I can't tell you the name of the airline because it was in Russian, but it had a wing hanging off. It was like turbines. I don't know what the hell we were traveling on. It was absolutely ridiculous. People were just lighting up cigarettes midway through the sky.
Pat, when you get on the Bakerloo line, and the seats look old as hell because they haven't been changed since the 80s.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it looked exactly like that. Stepping onto the plane, it's like we'd stepped onto the set of Mad Men, and this was supposed to be a plane in the 1980s, and like there was enough dust on it, to bury someone, but. Yeah, I was just glad we made it in and out of that one, mate. I remember travelling with Wizz Air and thinking, well, if I go down on this flight, people will say at my funeral, like, of course the plane crashed. It's called f***ing Wizz Air. And then I found out that I think the Icelandic or one of the Scandi nations is behind it, and that made me feel much more assured. But I think that's, again, a very good answer from you.
Yeah, Wizz Air. I've flown Wizz Air before. It's whiffing. Pat, you got anything?
I don't know about airlines. Like, I mean, I've been on some like propeller planes where I thought I was gonna die. Like
that.
I was in a prop plane in Miami once, and I was on a tiny little plane. Actually, once coming back from Germany, which I think was like EasyJet or something, and that I thought I was gonna die because it was like a 30-seater and there were 2 other people on it. And they put me in a seat next to someone. And I was like, are you fucking serious? I'm going to go and sit on the other side of the plane. There were like 3 of us and I'm sat next to this like bald man. So yeah, that was pretty dodgy. I had a dodgy flight from Paraguay to from Asuncion to Buenos Aires once, and Southern Africa is like there are some fly-by-night operations there. There's Kalula Air, which is like notoriously.
I've been on Kalula, bro.
Yeah, that is a death trap. I mean, like there are. Yeah, Kalula Air, you take your life in your hands.
Allegedly. Imagine Kalula Air suing us. That they can finish Sunday Vibes on.
It doesn't matter. The lawyer wouldn't make it here because he'd go down over the Atlantic.
All right, love it. All right, we've been shooting for quite a while today, so I hope everybody enjoyed that. Pato, podcast this week. I guess it was on the ESL.
Yeah, it was on the ESL. Believe it or not. Though I wish we'd waited a little bit longer. We could have gone with Mourinho. But yes, it is on the ESL, and it was with Zach and Doogie. So yeah, and make sure that you're supporting the pod because like the pod's going to have lots of interesting stuff going out on it. While I'm on paternity leave, we're going to have like different hosts. There are going to be different things going on. So I think it's going to be quite an exciting time for the podcast.
Yeah, exactly. Hamster, anything to plug?
I would have actually, by this point, one-on-one would have been out for a day over on Euro Football Daily, where I'm sort of challenging the Champions League reforms that Pat spoke about, 10 minutes ago. So it's kind of what we think they should do instead of what they're doing.
Okay, lovely. Right, thanks very much for everybody watching at home. See you later. Bye.
Bye.